If you have ever heard about a game design document, the first thing that comes to your mind is probably the giant folder of a thick document of 300 pages AAA games use in their production and sell a part of it as an art book later. But from my experience, GDD is the most useful for smaller games with a team of less than 10 people or just one. When applying for a master's degree in game design, I realized I needed a GDD in my portfolio. And as a true dev, I never made one. I mean, with all the games we were doing just fine without it, the chaos is our natural habitat, right? Right? I went to Google it. YouTube had nothing as well. I found that Unity template that was just a list of things basically. But what to include there and what it looks like, nobody knows. This is my own game design document that I have to copy every time I make a new one. I do have to waste time to erase everything like an idiot, so I decided to make a proper empty template. I will compile it step by step. You can grab the link in the description and follow along. The formatting standards come from the paper documents that can be redundant for your way of working. But for me, it's just the formatting thing, so I'll keep it in. It's easier to delete some pages than add them next time I start a new GDD. The first section consists of 5 key points. Let's have a closer look at them. The only thing to remember when writing a GDD is to keep the language consistent. Having a unified language will help you in the present and future, your team and everyone else involved. Title page. So the title page usually exists for the paper copies. If you prefer working with paper drafts, go for it. At the top we write the working title. I usually attach a general vibe screenshot or artwork. It's just an optional thing. What's not optional and actually matters and is referred to consistently throughout the development of the game is the version of the document. When the version of the document updates with a new build, pre-production, production, post-production, pre-release, post-release, forever. If you work with GDD on a cloud service like Google Docs, save the old copies to an archive when updating the document. Just in case you will have to revert all of it or only a part. Just make sure it's accurately reflecting the current state of the game's design and it's helping keep the development team aligned. At the bottom of the title page, you can include all legal information, for example, copyright license, your name, or the names of the game designers who worked on compiling the document. Table of contents page. This part is realistically the most used in the entire document. It should be clearly structured so your teams, or you, can easily navigate the document either by clicking or by the page numbers if it's a physical copy. In digital copy, it's important to use a clickable table of contents. The document legend. Right under the table of contents, it's recommended to have a very clear document legend. If you're using symbols, make sure it's clear what each indicates. It is a set of formatting styles that signify the most common elements of the thing in development, like a status, for example, work in progress, to be reviewed, etc. Links, so everyone knows that some words inside documents are linked to the referred pages, kinda like in a Wikipedia. It is crucial to mark the main points of references for all development teams, which we will see later as we go through the document. Also, keep in mind if you happen to use black and white printing, you'll have to either change everything to bold, italics, caps, or use other visual means to differentiate it. We don't use different fonts because sometimes not everyone has the same operating systems, word processors, or cloud services, including the people who plug in to print out the document if it happens. If you are not intending to use the paper copies at all, it's cool to use different colors as you need, but with additional symbols. For example, work in progress always has square brackets next to the color to help with accessibility. We will look at the concrete examples as we go further, but for now, just know that it has to be clearly identifiable. For printed versions, you will have to reference the actual page number every time, so the bigger your team is, the more polished it should be. You can't ask every single person who will be using this document for their daily work what shades of blue they are colorblind to. General game overview. We had a very short document legend, so I'll put the overview right here so it's easy to find. So what the general game overview is, it's basically your game pitch. If you're familiar with film and TV script writing, you probably suffered enough of it. You have to fit the entire story in one line. Is it similar to the elevator pitch? Imagine a player accidentally found a page of your GDD. This is the page they would understand the entire game from. Like if you met a producer in the elevator, you have 1 minute to describe your idea. Dunno. But that's the thing we're going for. There are a few crucial information points to state here. It's the 2 types of genres of your game. The first one is technical, the second is a fictional genre. Platform and engine and inspiration. You see, for this game we put 3D, single-player, action-adventure for the tech genre. For the engine and platform, PC and Unreal Engine 4. The inspirations are Okami meets Journey meets Zelda with the Alto vibes. It's a mobile game. I remember when the Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency was launching a TV show, it was described as Doctor Who meets Sherlock on drugs. So you can use only 2 very defining references like Diablo with guns. Oh, that's Borderlands. Or Zelda but with Norse mythology. Oh, this is God of War. Or even Life is Strange but for the poor. Night in the Woods. That is where we add the logline and genre of the story. This is not about technical stuff now, it's the story. Plot brief or the logline. For the Sildiojo, we wrote, post-catastrophic wasteland left 4 communities of the world struggling with environmental challenges in isolation. Deserted Earth turns goddess named Sildiojo environmental quest into a cultural exchange of the 4 primal art forms, with your help. Honestly, writing a plot brief of, as I said, hours of the story is tricky. Further in the narrative section, I will talk about the standard formula and how to use it in detail. 2. Key features are the things we need to list for the imaginary producer, or potential player in our case, to get what's so special about this game. Can you imagine how many Zelda but Apocalypse games there are? So we needed to pinpoint those before the GDD even is written, before the development even started. For this game I wrote, a popular game genre with a rare theme, indigenous cultures representation, mediation of conflicts, creative combat, a peek into real-life art history, humanity is more rewarded. The last one was kinda new at the time, but I don't think it's that rare anymore in action-adventure games with a combat. But it was somewhat innovative at the time, so I left it in. Lower on the page I added an additional text. Notice how it brings attention to the player's learning potential. As indigenous themes tend to be not well known, I wrote this. The player learns indigenous art forms originated from authentic ceremonial acts based on traditional beliefs, cosmos, animalism, shaman initiation, tracing the basic art history and human nature qualities arts represent, and have a peek into alternative evolution theory, species equality and inequality. So we all understand it. It's a fantasy setting, but based on true history and traditions. We also didn't want to have the typical magical realism game with a modern fantastication of the IRL indigenous culture. It's a fine balance and it takes more work to research it and then balance it out, then write the whole script, including all the drafts. If you're a writer, I'm sure you know that's what your actual job is, on top of language stuff. Well, congrats! The most important part of your document is done. To recap, the document version number goes on the title page and updates regularly with backups. The table of contents in providing an easily navigated structure. It's clickable if it's a digital document. The use of document legend exists to ensure consistency in formatting. A clear general game overview describes the game's premise. The key features highlight the unique aspects of the game. Now comes the actual document. 1. Gameplay. This is a place where many things will be dependent on the type of game you're making. For the sake of the template, I'll keep whatever I use the most. To preface, I also want to point out the difference between gameplay and mechanics. Gameplay is a player's experience playing the game, the overall experience in the flow of the game, what they see, where they decide to move and do actions, etc. And mechanics are the tools and design choices we set up in advance to navigate the gameplay. 1. Core loop. This is the heart of your game. What actions do players keep coming back to? Think the primary cycle of actions that players will repeatedly perform, such as gathering resources, crafting, and combat. Here, I point out the loops of the mechanics. Each loop is a goal that players have to repeat as they progress through the game. So, to put it simply, it's a set of goals, from small to big. The smallest ones repeat the most, and the biggest repeat the least. For example, in this game, when we start a game, our main loop will be to progress to another level. Each level has a different map, so these two words are interchangeable. We came up with quests or mini-games. They are the quests given by the NPCs. There could be up to 10 quests per area. They repeat until the location becomes inaccessible. This is the loop 4. The goal of this loop is to obtain shard fragments. Next, our character moves between areas. Areas are interconnected zones that get gradually unlocked. Here we have a goal to obtain the disc to find a source of pollution. It will be the boss area. That is the loop 3. Location is a part of the map. For example, a lake location is a part of the forest map. There are 4 maps in total, that is the loop 1, and their goal would be to obtain or learn new art forms. 2. Player definitions. Player definitions are the stuff your character has, so they are details about the player's character, including attributes like health, energy, inventory, and any other relevant stats or abilities. Sometimes you have to limit or expand beyond just the health, energy, and inventory. Some games don't need either, or only a few. For our game, we had the creative energy boost, that basically is a health meter. If enemy bites you, you'll lose it. Then weapons, it can be viewed as art-based skills, because you can't take part in combat without your learned skills. Combat skills, drawing on the screen, playing jaw harp, dancing with a drum, wearing snow goggles, multiple choice dialogue, picking up items, note reading, map marking, and using transport. 3. Player properties overview. This is a detailed list of all the player's abilities, skills, and equipment. Here we describe how do these elements affect gameplay, making a comprehensive list of all player properties such as skills, abilities, and equipment, and how they impact gameplay. 4. Enemy system. Here goes our clickable navigation link, by the way. It leads enemy dev department to the art page about the enemies. Here we describe the different types of enemies, their behaviors, abilities, and how they challenge the player. 4.1. Bosses. Here we detail each boss' unique abilities and strategies and how they fit into the game's story. Specific details about boss characters, including their unique abilities, strategies, and how they fit into the game's progression. 5. Combat system overview. Here we explain how fighting works in your game. What are the controls like? What kinds of attacks and defenses can players use? This is an explanation of the combat mechanics, including controls, attack types, defense mechanisms, and any special combat features. 6. Skill progress system. It's about how do players get better over time. Here we talk about leveling up, skill trees, and any abilities they can unlock. 7. Gameplay outline. It's about how players can develop and improve their skills over time, including leveling systems, skill trees, and unlockable abilities. Here we give a broad overview of the game's structure. What are the main objectives? What key elements drive the gameplay? Did you know when an idea fails to translate well into your game, when the narrative structure is weak, when the story is not paced correctly, when the plot, characters, and lore are not functional, and the choices lack depth and are filled with cliches, you can send me your draft for feedback or request a custom narrative design for your game. Because my channel is a wee baby, the first 5 people to use the link in the description will be getting the story feedback free of charge. Just remember to tick the correct thing in the form that says a giveaway. And subscribe for the future announcements.
You try your best, but you don't succeed.
Okay, back to the document. Gameplay flow. Here we describe how the game progresses from start to finish. How do levels unfold? What's the pacing like? A detailed description of how the game progresses from start to finish, including level design, pacing, and key events. 2. Interface and UI. Describe your user interface. What do the menus look like? How do players interact with the game? Details about the game's user interface, including menus, HUD elements, and how players interact with the game. For example, for our menu screen, we had this. Menu screen, current stats of the player, map progress, avatar and nickname, the settings button, the resume, the new game, and quit buttons. The background art determined by the map progress went as follows. Background changes depending on where on the 4 locations the last save was. And a guide for the art. It depicts the horse and the girl resting and camping. The environment becomes progressively more polluted and characters more restless by the final map 4. For the pause screen I wrote, sheer overlay with buttons, continue, load, options, quit, options, screen resolution, sound off, on, language, back button. For the in-game screen we set a health bar, stamina aka creativity, active ability, shards, disc completion progress, a mini-map, inventory menu and a skill tree. And the inventory menu, I had an attire menu with some clothes and other customization miscellaneous for the girl and horse to wear. We also have the skill tree here, the endgame screen with the credits roll, and a pop-up overlay window for notifications and other stuff. It is recommended to have an interface flowchart. Here we create a visual map of the UI, show how different screens and menus connect. A visual representation of the user interface shows how different screens and menus are connected. See, I'm not a UI expert. Usually if we have a team, they are filling their own part of the GDD on their own, coming from their experiences, whatever is working the best for the game. So I just put whatever I could find online. Here are some tools and resources to make your own UI I found useful for my work. What I can show, however, that is the narrative design section. So remember in the beginning we were writing some of the story info? Now we have to elaborate as much as possible. Narrative. Here we write the genre. Here are the main ones to pick from. RPG, MMO and MOBA, sandbox, simulator, roguelike, puzzle, sport, first-person shooter or a fighter, real-time strategy or turn-based strategy. There could be more than one genre, but usually it's 1 or 2 maximum. Next, we establish a theme. The theme is a broad description of your story, like coming of age, courage and heroism, freedom and confinement, good versus evil, identity, justice and injustice, love, power and corruption, redemption, survival, etc. Then comes a logline. The formula for it is a protagonist plus inciting incident plus the goal plus conflict or stakes. So in other words, who? What happened to make them take actions? Why? And what's gonna happen if they don't do it? For example, the protagonist helps 4 villages get rid of pollution by learning and giving art forms to each of them. Who? The protagonist. What happened? Pollution. Why? To give art forms to support the ecosystem. What's at stake? The world of pollution and the slow decay. A band of adventurers who pass through the rogue encampment learns about the demon's destruction and attempt to find out the cause of the evil. An elf-like hero named Link is chosen to take on the dangerous quest to rescue Princess Zelda and defeat the evil Ganon. A photography student learns she can rewind time. With her best friend, she investigates the mysterious disappearance of a fellow student, uncovering dark secrets in their small town. Not only story-heavy games have a logline, sometimes the game mechanic itself becomes the goal and the conflict. An aspiring street racer enters an underground scene in the city to establish respect among fellow racers. The goal is to win races and upgrades are tied to leveling up, so failure just means redoing the race indefinitely. In a vast, procedurally generated world, a lone adventurer must gather resources, craft weapons, and build shelters to survive against monsters, uncovering secrets and treasures. A player goes on a journey through a kingdom of sweets, solving challenging match 3 puzzles to progress through levels and unlock new episodes. The goal is to achieve high scores and compete on the leaderboard, with the stakes being waiting real life time before they can reattempt a level if they fail. The next thing is to have a story brief. Now, I usually list the main narrative mechanics. For our game, they were shards, abilities, skills, and dialogue. The next stop to consider is the world and lore. They are essentially the setting and the context of the story. Here you can describe and include maps and geography of the worlds, NPCs and other characters' culture and lifestyle, geopolitics, stuff like that. I also include story flow. It's the story in the order it's experienced by the player. It's not always chronological. Usually, it's never chronological. For our game, I wrote, The girl helps 4 villages to get rid of pollution by learning and teaching art forms to each. And we also include the protagonist's background here separately for some clarity as well. For the characters info, it's just a little table with the main characters. Each has a name, species, age, a significant features listed. I usually make the same type of table for the enemies and other side characters as well. 4. Art and Visual Guide. This section is also fully on the art team's shoulders, so I only put down some general design shapes to incorporate anywhere where it's possible. If anyone knows how to include stuff into other stuff, it's the artists. I also pointed out the art requirements for the 4 main weapons that the whole game is built around. But for everything else, I made a small sample of real-life references. On Pinterest usually I have a giant mood board, and inside it's organized as much as possible. You can re-upload all references to a Google Disk if you ever find it more efficient for some reason. As you see, I included some ideas for enemies for each level, environment, architecture, and general accessories style for the characters and NPCs. 5. Sound design. Here we describe the game's audio. What kind of music, sound effects, and voice acting will it have? I wrote a guide for the overall vibe and included several links and names of the soundtracks to bounce off from. The music throughout the game will have a constant motif of melancholy. There will obviously be no upbeat, major key jingles for completing milestones in the game. Even upon picking up crucial items to progress the story, the jingle will be small and minor key. A lot of the musical elements could be reused during similar sequences. It also can be replaced with some silence, as it will be a key contributing factor, setting suspense and mood for the player. A contrast of the ugly and the beautiful, or as stated before, repulsion and attraction. Other stuff to include are songs, original soundtrack, sound effects. 6. Localization. How will you adapt the game for different languages and regions? Here I wrote the plans for translating and adapting the game for different languages and regions. Because the game included real-life Arctic regions, we wanted to prioritize the localization in those countries where the indigenous languages are often not official to the whole country. Game audio languages are differentiated by the maps or levels, with characters using modern indigenous languages presented below. The default subtitle option is English, but includes other built-in languages upon release. Subtitle languages are chosen by the governmentally recognized languages spoken at the indigenous territories represented in the game. Due to the limited resources, this game will focus only on the 4 biggest indigenous groups in the Arctic. Hence, the criteria for the map audio language is chosen. Apart from that, the game's subtitles and UI can be localized to any language via open source contributions from the players and other people. 7. Target market. Who's going to play your game? Here we'd include demographic info and any market research of the game's intended audience and market research graphs and so on. Also, don't forget to write end of document or something else to signify it is the last page in case you merge your GDD with other documents, and to make sure that people reading it understand nothing was lost or cut out and they in fact have a whole document on hand.